Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Alaka with Torrey Hills Capital, and I want to welcome you to the Revive Therapeutics webcast for February 10th, 2022. Hope everyone's doing well under the circumstances, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are very excited to bring you Revive Therapeutics. Revive Therapeutics is a life sciences company focused on the research and development of therapeutics for infectious diseases and rare disorders. The company's pipeline includes treatments for COVID, which is finishing phase 3 trials, substance abuse disorders such as methamphetamine abuse, neurological disorders such as concussion and stroke, mental health disorders such as anxiety and depression, and liver disease such as hepatitis. Revive Therapeutics is addressing a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity in its COVID treatment alone. Revive Therapeutics trades on the OTC market under the ticker RVVTF and on the CSE exchange under the ticker RVV. The company shares are currently trading with a market cap of only 70 million US, and based on the size of the addressable market, as well as the pipeline of treatments that the company has, we feel that there's plenty of upside in the stock. With us today to discuss Revive Therapeutics and the company's strategy going forward is the company's chairman and CEO, Michael Frank. We also have with us Derrick Welsh, the COO and founder of psilocybin Pharma. And we also have Dr. Mark Sweem, our resident expert at Torrey Hills Capital and all things biotech. So I want to welcome you all on today, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you again.
Yeah, before we get started, I just want to mention, if our viewers have any questions during the presentation, simply type them into the Q&A box, and we will make sure that they get answered. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sweem for some opening comments, then Michael and Derrick will take us through the presentation. So with that said, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anthony. We're genuinely excited to host Revive today. I think some people don't necessarily know how we go about procuring companies to appear on webcasts like this, but we sort of filter feed what's out there. And recently, I somehow spotted the therapeutic protocol that Revive has using bucillamine in pulmonary manifestations of COVID, and was very excited by that. And so it's really a pleasure to bring them here, to sort of, have plucked them out of the lineup and gotten them to come on. We're delighted. It really excites me. And they have several other jewels in the portfolio as well. Of course, we're focusing maybe on the bucillamine story today, but everybody knows about the late stage pulmonary complications that vex some COVID patients, and the lungs scar down horribly. The patient becomes more refractory to oxygenation. And there are, of course, many document instances of people coming to lung transplant because the lungs are fibrotic and, rigid and just don't work for gas exchange anymore. And that's just not going to get better. I wouldn't necessarily equate inflammation with oxidation, but certainly it's fair to say that for bad inflammation, IL-6 driven as it is in advanced COVID, oxidation almost certainly is a major component of that. And the strategy here is to use a potent reducing agent to try to, quash or squelch that oxidative damage and arrest the pulmonary fibrosis development before it really reaches the end stages it can quickly do. I think it's a brilliant protocol. I think it's important to maybe not get too technical, except to say that oxidation and reduction are sort of Janus faces of the same thing. And it's often thought of that oxidation is the losing of electrons, having them taken hostage by another molecule nearby, and reduction is the gaining of electrons. And that may seem a little arcane or odd, but suffice it to say that oxidative processes on normal tissues, normal proteins generally are injurious, whereas the reduction side of things tends to cool, soothe, abate, heal. And there are precedents for other inflammatory illnesses like gout, for example, where use simply of reducing agents to quench the oxidant stew that's driving the disease makes patients feel better and do better and recover. So it's with great anticipation that we await the phase 3 outcome here. I kind of think it's going to be positive. And I think we'll cover, though, during this webcast that what we particularly like is that this company is flying under radar, is frankly undervalued. Of course, we don't give investing advice here, but if this company manifests full potential with success in the trials, a little mind-boggling to think how share price could pop from here, given the assumption that it takes on the valuation of comparable companies in the space and gets EUA or approval for use of bucillamine. It could really be a high return investment. For sake of disclosure, I don't own shares yet. I intend to buy. I do in the very near future. I'm kind of swapping funds around to do so. But enough about me, enough about my portfolio. Welcome to Michael Frank, the CEO, and to Derrick Welsh, and looking forward to hearing from you, and take it away.
Pleasure. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, just had a bit of a freezing moment there. But yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for hosting us today. My name is Michael Frank. I'm here with Derrick. And we can go through a bit of the history of Revive and also, talk about where it's going and where it came from. It's a bit of a very interesting story. So appreciate Anthony working through the slides. So maybe we'll just go to the first slide. If you could move it up.
Yep.
Okay, the next one. Okay, so just a little history. Really, we're focused on as being a life sciences company, repurposing drugs. I was an investor in the company, and the company found a drug called bucillamine, repurposed it out of South Korea and Japan. It's got a 30-year history working with rheumatoid arthritis, and we ran a phase 2A study for gout in the U.S. And at that time, I believe we're up against even today, colchicine, which is a well-known drug, and the company had favorable results with this drug, bucillamine, for gout, and it ended up, it didn't continue the program. It basically shelved it and started working with different types of protocols, working a lot actually in the cannabis pharmacology sector, where it had worked on delivery systems, and we also had a lot of work using cannabinoids to address autoimmune hepatitis. The company has FDA orphan drug designation for cannabinoids to treat autoimmune hepatitis and also reperfusion injury. So that was sort of the path that sort of moved away from this bucillamine and worked on different delivery systems, kept building its portfolio of products. And then when I came into the company, it took it over December 2019. I realized that I had a tremendous amount of IP, and I started repurposing and moving different directions. I took a lot of delivery systems that we had at the University of Wisconsin for tannin, chitosan as a platform, and I moved it to psilocybin, working with formulations through a company we acquired from Derrick, and just building our work in psychedelics. We have a number of different patents which we filed, which are provisional in terms of formulation development for oral strips, oral dosages. We're working with different areas like University of North Carolina in terms of developing synthetic versions of psilocybin, and because psilocybin is expensive, so working with those frameworks around E. coli specifically. And we've got a lot of different programs in psychedelics, but the main platform story right now is bucillamine. So getting back to it, what I did back in sort of the summer of 2020, I looked at the mechanism of action of bucillamine. And at that time, you looked at some of the other drugs that were being given, monoclonal antibodies. There were also intravenous drugs earlier on that were very prevalent. And there were some other arthritic drugs that were intravenous. And I felt that bucillamine, because of its history with the gout, running that trial, I know Dr. Mark mentioned gout before as well. I saw some of the same things. This drug being a cytokine suppressor, a strong antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. I felt that potentially I could have a platform for COVID. And, we applied with our team back late 2020 summer, and then into sort of late summer, early fall, we were approved to proceed to a phase 3 trial for COVID with bucillamine. And we didn't run a phase 1 or phase 2. We basically just fast tracked right to the phase 3. a double-blinded study up to 1,000 people. And that's where we are today. So we can talk a little more about it as we move through the slides, but sort of that's the background of the company. And, you know, when I took over the company, it had I mentioned a lot of IP, and actually at that time it was only trading for about about $1.5 million Canadian market cap, believe it or not. I took it over, and we did a small financing. I financed as well the company in terms of debentures, and got it going, and sort of reformulated the whole business to take it to the next levels. Next slide, please. So just recapping, you know, some of the things I mentioned. You know, we've got you know, strength in clinical development. Our team working through the FDA process, focusing on psilocybin, history with cannabinoid oils, and obviously bucillamine being our lead platform. But always looking for take advantage of, you know, some of the incentives from the FDA, looking at a lot of different programs, obviously targeting rare disorders, and we like the infectious disease area. And that's initially when we started with bucillamine. Obviously, some of the IP we filed on provisionals were around the bucillamine for infectious diseases. Also, delivery systems, as I mentioned, is a very big part of it. We're focused on novel uses and formulations, specifically taking the IP we have from University of Wisconsin, where we've done a lot of work, and moving that to the psychedelic psilocybin sector. And taking advantage, as I mentioned, with some of these designations. The company has strong IP portfolio, a number of provisional patents. We have patents for bucillamine to treat. We have a patent around gout with bucillamine. And as I mentioned, we have orphan drug designation, FDA for autoimmune hepatitis with CBD, and also reperfusion injury. And, you know, we're working with a number of different areas, continuing to build our portfolio. Next. So just quickly mentioning a little more on our whole patent portfolio and our provisionals we filed. The first one obviously is around bucillamine, infectious diseases with COVID. When you file the IND with the FDA, you have to be very specific. Even though we filed some provisionals around broader infectious diseases, COVID is the IND that we addressed, and that filed provisionally. And then, as I mentioned, we have patents around gout for bucillamine treating gout that have been issued, and a number of drug delivery systems patents, which are licensed from University of Wisconsin, where we've done a lot of work with, as I mentioned, with cannabis, developing products around that from a pharmacology perspective. And then we transcend it to psychedelics, where we're working on building a number of products for clinical use right now. As I mentioned, we're partnered University of Wisconsin. We're doing work for formulation development with a group called LTS in Europe. We're doing synthetic psilocybin work at University of North Carolina. We're going to also be in a phase 2 study, which working on. We've done a lot of preclinical work, but the studies are supposed to be starting this quarter with the University of Wisconsin around meth addiction, and also working on studies with TBI and stroke with the School of Pharmacy in Wisconsin. So taking advantage of a lot of our drug delivery and some of the work that the team has done on their own at the University of Wisconsin. So we're sponsoring that study. We have access to a lot of the data, and you know, we'll move that forward down the clinical path when the time's ready. Next. So looking at a sort of a pipeline here of products and on timelines. Bucillamine is obviously the lead story. We're in a phase 3. It's a double-blinded study, up to 1,000 people. We've dosed about 701 or slightly more, 715. But what we've done is we moved a lot of the sort of the tail end of the trial to Turkey recently. That was announced because of the profile of patients that are in Europe. And we noticed that some of the other majors like Merck. A lot of their trial was run in Eastern Europe because of the sort of the patient profile and the fact that people get sick, the drugs given in the hospital. So this is an international study, so it gives also diversity to the study. And we recently announced that, so a large part of the remainder of the study will be in Turkey, and you could read some of those press releases on our site. We're working also, as I mentioned, psilocybin. We have a sort of phase 1/phase 2 study in the pipeline with University School of Pharmacy at Wisconsin, and working on substance use disorder for meth and neurological for stroke. And that's, a lot of pre-screening work and so forth has been done. There were some delays, obviously, with COVID in terms of getting that kick-started, but that's a very big goal for us, obviously, to sort of harness a lot of the work we've done with psilocybin into these studies and working with the team. We're one of the fewer Canadian companies in psychedelics, some of the other majors you might know of, but that are working with U.S. universities. So obviously, we believe in working with credible U.S. universities and moving the programs further along. And we're also, through University of Wisconsin, we're also a partner of USONA, which supplies a lot of psilocybin. Really, there's today two groups you can license psilocybin from or procure from, which are USONA and also Compass Pathways. We're also developing a lot of sort of taking the formulations that we've built from Wisconsin and building the actual product, oral thin film strips, with a group called LTS in Europe. And then those finished products will go into the pipeline to go down the clinical path with the FDA. So those are major product focuses. On the CBD side, we still have, as I mentioned, patents. We still have a lot of IP. And we have CBD to treat autoimmune hepatitis, orphan drug designation, but we're still planning to file INDs and work that down the clinical path further. University of Wisconsin is a partner of us. Sorry, University of Indiana is one of our partners with on the cannabis oil side.
Michael, I want to jump in for a second if I could. I was trained as a hepatologist, and I've long wanted to see a CBD trial for autoimmune hepatitis. No disease progresses more aggressively to end-stage liver disease than it. And I'm really enthused about you doing that. And you don't have any preliminary data at all, so still just pre-phase 2.
Yeah, like right now, a lot of that is that work has been preclinical, but the University of Indiana is quite active in that area, and we acquired a lot of IP from University of South Carolina initially around that program.
Okay.
So it's still, of great interest to us. But as I mentioned, small Canadian companies, with funding and so forth, we try to address the lowest hanging fruits, or really been much more focused on bucillamine and psilocybin. But we do have interest to explore that. On autoimmune hepatitis with CBD, and also on reperfusion injury as well.
Sure. Yeah. For your psilocybin programs, are you targeting to go with subhallucinogenic doses, sort of the way some other players are? Or can you speak to that?
Yeah, Derrick, can you address that?
Yeah. So with our program, we're catering to a little bit of both. We've seen a lot of data that supports microdosing and a lot of data that supports macrodosing in certain situations. More specifically, when you look at the addiction side, it really tends to support a macrodose, because the ability of psychedelics to kind of remap the brain and rearrange the way the neurons and synapses go on throughout the brain is really indicative there. But also we see a lot of benefit in anxiety and depression in the microdose space, something between 5 and 25 milligrams. So the subtherapeutic or sub-psychedelic dose is really, of interest to us, as well as the macrodosing. When we saw in our rat model study that we did out of the Taiwan Health Institute there, we saw a really unique difference in a specific group of mice when it came to how they were once receiving the head injury and how they benefited in the acute phase. And so when we look at concussion and rehab, we really don't have any pills today that we can give somebody in the acute phase of rehab,
Right.
specifically in relation to concussion and acquired brain injury. So when you look at some of these guys like Sidney Crosby and these guys who have been had their skull rocked, to say the least, we don't have much to give them other than your standard physiotherapy supports and anti-inflammatories, which do nothing for the neural pathways in the brain that have been significantly damaged. So we see the opportunity to address both segments, and we're going to be addressing both in University of Wisconsin, as well as addressing others at the University of Antigua in the next coming months.
Yeah, so just further to that, Mark, just getting back, like we're also, Derrick's also spearheading, we're looking to do some, real strong programs in Antigua with the university there and the government supporting it in terms of opening, supporting some of these clinics there.
Right.
But as far as, research and so forth, like we do have a lot of preclinical work on the cannabis side, and also with bucillamine. I may add also that although we have phase 2A study for gout, this drug has a 30-year safety, bucillamine, South Korea and Japan for arthritis. Those are the reasons why, with a strong safety, we were able to fast track right to phase 3. But we have a lot of preclinical work on bucillamine in terms of going back to like mid 2000s with a number of doctors, which showed that bucillamine is very effective in, treating inflammation, for reperfusion injury, after heart transplants.
Sure.
And a lot of different areas. So all that sort of gave, I'm not a doctor, but, when I put it all together, that's what I came up with, is that this drug could be, strong suppressor of inflammation. Obviously, with getting back to COVID, you have, reactive oxygen species event, which, causes a lot of oxidation across the body, which leads to, cytokine storm. And, the data on bucillamine to show that has been strong, and specifically in arthritis for 30 years, suppressing, cytokine markers like, TNF alpha and IL-6 and IL-8, stuff like that. Right. So, so by
you may have real post-MI, acute, post-MI, post-CVA, markets as well there. There's so many places you can plug that in. Seriously.
Obviously, bucillamine, everything is, we're getting back obviously to this topic, so just a little more to add. Like we're getting back to talking about bucillamine. As I mentioned, as I sort of figured out that this could play a role, and obviously, it was a great achievement getting to phase 3. But earlier on with COVID, you saw, obviously some of the monoclonal antibody drugs, which were more talked about than now, Gilead, Regeneron, but Eli Lilly also has arthritic drug called Tocilizumab, which is a RA drug, which is intravenous. They're all intravenous drugs. They're not a pill. So having a pill is unique. So like as it stands right now, like our drug is an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-rheumatic. It could work with some of the antivirals. Work on its own. The big also story that came out of this sort of in the summer is we subsidized a lot of work actually with the National Institute of Health with University of California, San Francisco campus, Dr. John Fahey, which he's a very, very strong, I think I sent you some of those articles. And he's a very strong pulmonary guy, did a lot of work with lung work, cystic fibrosis. Obviously, bucillamine is a very versatile drug, which could work for other lung disorders, like cystic fibrosis. But we subsidized the work around preclinical work, which showed that field donors, such as bucillamine is a glutathione enhancer. It's a field donor.
Right.
Okay, and it's the data on this drug is that it's 16 times, 1/6 more powerful than nasylcysteine, and a lot of people have been taking nasylcysteine for COVID.
Right.
In Canada, you can get it. In the US, they pulled it. Now, field donors, which include nasylcysteine, he did work in a lab with a sample virus, which showed that field drugs, there were 4 or 5 drugs, bucillamine was one of them, would stop the binding of the virus, SARS-2 virus, to the ACE2 cells. So it actually had a prophylactic benefit. And that was a paper that was written by pretty, top-notch guys coming out of University of California, San Francisco, on Delta, the Delta variant. And then we did it. And then we did it for Omicron, and it showed basically that 4 drugs prevented the binding of the virus to the cell, and those 4 were cysteamine, WR1065. They were cancer drugs, mesna, and bucillamine. Now, the other drugs are mostly used. They're actually used in cancer treatments, but they're mostly given intravenously. But we were one of the 4 or 5 top drugs that made it, and it was a very compelling argument to stipulate that that the antiviral component of bucillamine does exist, but we're not really we're not looked at as an antiviral, but it had that capability to prevent the binding. So that was very interesting.
Is a reduction mechanism? Is the ostensible antiviral effect a reduction mechanism?
It's basically the production of glutathione, like
glutathione,
that in your body, and the cleaving of the prevention of the cleaving of the virus to the cell.
Okay.
So it's interesting research. I believe I did send it to you and Anthony, but that was big validation work done. So the bottom line is that this drug does have credible science around it to support that that is a very strong potential treatment for COVID. But once again, science is not trials. Trials are based on different metrics, hospitalizations, and statistical models and different things of efficacy. So it's pretty strong achievement for a small company to be able to move into this realm, phase 3, and dose over 700 patients. We're sort of 75% in, and hopefully we'll continue on with success for EUA and some of these other areas. But as I mentioned, a large part of the remainder of the trial we moved to Eastern Europe, based on looking at some of Merck's data, and Pfizer was there as well too. But
no plans for any sort of interim analysis.
Oh no, in our drug, unfortunately it's a double-blinded, so we don't have interim.
Okay.
It was obviously the safety is key, and it's been strong to keep moving through.
Yeah.
Which allowed us to take it to this point. But we talk more about it, I guess, as we continue on. I mean, there's more slides. So let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Next slide. Yeah. So just continuing, with the storyline here. I mean, obviously, the slides, trigger some more conversation, but so we're ongoing with the trial. The drug has a 30-year safety in Japan and South Korea, and that was a big supporting a piece of information, I guess, to allow the FDA to fast track us to phase 3 without phase 1/2. We have clinical history with bucillamine. We've worked. We have a gout work done with it. There's been some other areas where bucillamine has been worked, but we have an orphan drug designation. As I mentioned, we're working with bucillamine as well to look at ODD for reperfusion and other areas, but we have patents around gout, and we did run the gout 2-way study. And we also did work around cystinuria with bucillamine. That we did part of a trial there as well. So, as at the time, it was about funding and looking at other areas. Cannabis sector was very hot, so that's why bucillamine ended up getting shelved, and the company redirected, and I brought it back to the fold. So that's in 29, sort of early 2020 when I came into the company. Some of the scientific rationale, as we just talked about, Mark and myself, but obviously it's noticed as 16 times more powerful than acetylcysteine. Acetylcysteine has been heralded, a lot of reviews on it. It's talked about quite extensively, like ivermectin. It's not a prescription drug, but I believe now it is in the U.S. But it's an antioxidant as well, glutathione enhancer, and our drug is much more powerful, and even a lot of the research done out of California showed that as well, how much more powerful it is than acetylcysteine. But bucillamine, strong preventive oxidation and reperfusion candidate drug, also preventing further heart and liver tissue injury, and just a strong safety profile overall. Next slide. Yeah, so a little bit more on some of the work we've done, acquisitions, capital markets initiatives. When I came in, I looked at the delivery systems for cannabis, which we're still, we still have, and we do want to obviously move autoimmune hepatitis forward. But working with Derrick, we acquired his company psilocybin, which he's got a strong background working with cannabis development of products and strong understanding of the psychedelic realm, and we acquired a lot of IP from him and took those formulations, did some more provisional patents on it, and worked with our partners to take the work around the patents forward, like University of Wisconsin and North Carolina and areas like that. So we're doing a lot of work in psychedelics. We also earlier this week announced some further information on work on the Ganarim platform, which is basically a drug which is being worked on by St. Jude's. It's not a drug, it's a natural remedy, to treat potentially breast cancer. But we're working with a lot of different universities around the sort of psychedelic realm. And how it all started really was with the acquisition of psilocybin. We also are partnered with a company called PharmaTher. And PharmaTher is a leading provider of ketamine. They've got a lot of work done with the University of Arizona with ketamine, planning on running phase 2 studies. They had a lot of strong intellectual property around stroke TBI with psilocybin, which we acquired earlier, sort of back sometime in 2021. So we acquired all that IP, and that gave us a platform around TBI and stroke and some of the other work that we're doing with Wisconsin go forward. Doing other work with LTS on formulation development, which is a big partner in Germany. And as I mentioned, looking at the unique ways of creating psilocybin from different organisms, namely in this case, E. coli, to look at the new wave of how psilocybin is going to be fabricated, because it is an expensive compound. Derrick, you want to add anything to that as well?
So when we look at psilocybin, we have to look at, there's two methods of getting psilocybin for research. One method is to naturally extract the mushrooms themselves, and the other method is to synthetically create it. Our team is working on a method of synthesis using E. coli bacteria, not too different from manufacturing of drugs like Taxol or vitamin C. Many drugs we use today are manufactured using, many drugs, vitamins, other compounds. So for example, penicillin and vitamin C are both manufactured using a yeast or an E. coli pathway. Most of our cancer drugs are manufactured using an E. coli pathway simply because it's more efficient. It's able to deliver repeatable results every single time that they go to use it. This is really important for API development, as well as developing a self-sustaining system where Revive's process that we're working on for synthesis may one day be able to feed our outputs, for example, our breath strips or our hydrogels and things like that, that will eventually go to market, and go to market in one of two ways, either a recreational based model, or it's going to go to market in a prescription based model, both of which I think will happen within the next 4 to 5 years. World regulatory bodies, for example, Health Canada has already opened it up for physicians to begin prescribing magic mushrooms to patients through certain protocols. In the US, we've seen decriminalization in a number of different states, and we've seen the whole psychedelic renaissance kind of taking place. And so, we're competing against very common anti-anxiety, antidepressants, and things of that nature. And we see the risk profile of those drugs has been greatly increased because of risk of dependence, because of risk of overuse or underuse, and the symptoms associated with weaning off of them. When we take a look at magic mushrooms, they don't carry the same propensity for addiction. They don't carry the same issues when exiting the drug or exiting the treatment. So we see it as a great opportunity to really address the new age of medicine that's coming into place.
Thanks, Derrick. Next slide. Yeah, so just a little more of a background. As I mentioned, we work strongly with delivery systems, and history is working with Wisconsin on tannin and shitozin delivery systems, and that was really in the cannabis sector. And I'm sorry, excuse me, my dog might be barking in the back, but apologies. The delivery systems we had on the cannabis side, we really saw a lot of benefit for the psychedelic sector, and we had a chance to move that really and see the benefits on some of the work Derrick's doing as well. And that's sort of a big cornerstone of our psilocybin programs. And so we're really focused on delivery on psilocybin as sort of the lead. Cannabis oil is important to us, and we'll look at those programs to continue on. And obviously, the lead story still is getting bucillamine further down the trial. Next slide. These are some of our partners from Alum on the CRO side, working with now in Turkey extensively. We've got a pretty strong infrastructure there right now with one of our medical guys is one of our lead doctors actually is involved with the university and the government there. So, very excited about the quality of patients we're going to bring in for the remainder of the trial, and through Delta Health, which is one of the companies in the university and the whole hospital infrastructure. LTS is making formulations for us in Germany, one of the elite players. Pharmather, it's also a QB listed company, and also in the CSE, and focused on ketamine. And South Carolina, where our hepatitis program originated, North Carolina, Wisconsin. So we like to work with a lot with U.S. universities and institutions that are recognized. We're not doing, tons of work, offshore like some of the other players. Although we're going to be doing some work with Antigua. Our cornerstone is really working with these U.S. universities. Next slide. Right. So just look at the milestones. We're a small company, and obviously we're trying to maximize the amount of work and staffing and a number of different variables along the way. So obviously our goal is always to complete this quarter, the trial, and as I mentioned, it moved the balance of it to Turkey, and we're excited about the type, as I mentioned, the type of patients that are going to be there. And hopefully we'll be able to hit some of those numbers, like at least the sort of the 800 first level, and look at that potentially as applying for EUA at that level if possible, if not continuing on with the rest of the trial. But we should hopefully have some opportunity to do the FDA EUA at that time this quarter. That's our goal. And we're working as fast as we can with the budgets we have to obviously meet timelines, meet milestones, and there's a lot of logistics in it in terms of organizing these trials. So appreciate everybody's support and understanding. And the phase 2 studies, which are very key for us with Wisconsin in terms of the data that comes out of it, TBI, stroke, and meth addiction. And FDA also this quarter working in terms of getting a pre-IND on the psilocybin oral strip with LTS, and scaling that up more and taking that down more the clinical path. And got a lot of exciting work done with Antigua as well, where we'll hope to announce soon in terms of some of our partners and some of the clinic work that we're going to be able to unveil in that country. Next slide. Yeah, so this slide's a bit, I guess, a bit dated, but not that far off because we're looking at Canadian market caps, I guess. So in terms of some of the other players, that's how it stacks up. Some of the other players in the COVID space that are micro caps like Citadin, Humanagen, and Relief. They're also trading. I mean, obviously they pulled back in this market. I think some of their trials were completed, some didn't make it, so they may have adjusted market caps. But we're trading around right now around 90 million Canadian, and that's sort of 90, 100 million Canadian. So when I took over this company, it had a market cap of 1.5 million Canadian. It's trading for around 2-3 cents, believe it or not. And at its height, December last year, went up to around 90. and it was trading sort of around the 50-cent range and up until sort of Christmas, January, and then it sort of pulled back. Obviously the market has come off a lot, but we're just continuing on the program, and hopefully science will speak for itself. But we think the company is undervalued in terms of all its pillars and initiatives that it has. Next slide. Yeah, so the some of the other comparables in psychedelics as well. Some of the bigger players at Thai, Compass, you may know, MindMed. So we believe we have a very strong portfolio that rivals some of them, and we're sort of the sum of the parts story. Psychedelics and the COVID and delivery in one company is quite a unique story in terms of having those three initiatives. So we believe the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, and the market cap eventually will be reflective of the work we're doing. Next slide. That's a bit of our team, and myself and Derrick, and our main clinical guys, Dr. Kelly McKee, and working with a number of other players, and you mentioned Dr. Manujbo and Dr. Moody in terms of epidemiologist side, Dr. Fahy, which wrote some very strong papers around, as I mentioned, some of the work in terms of the binding of the virus to ACE2 cells and how field drugs could be prophylactic and great sort of quasi-antiviral in that respect. So strong work done there. And that's a board of directors, a lot of different people from the science and business side. Next slide. Okay, and it's a bit of our deck in terms of pricing and so forth. So market cap and so forth. And there's about 315 million shares outstanding. Trade on the CSE and on the QB.
Great.
That's it. So that's I guess that's sort of a summary. That's the end of it. And the last slide really talks more about the science of bucillamine, and I think we went over some of it, but it sort of gives you a description.
Great. Nope, that's great, and I appreciate Michael and Derrick for coming on today, and obviously you're very close to the commercialization of bucillamine for COVID-19, which obviously would be a game changer for the company, but making great progress with your psilocybin and your CBD programs as well. I'm going to open it up to Q&A right now. And so if you have a question, I think the easiest way is to type it into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure it gets answered. So do you have a question that has come in about your burn rate? So is it possible to address your burn rate and kind of where you stand in terms of maybe potentially needing to raise money in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a huge team, so from an operations side, I mean, our burn rate has been controlled, and a lot of this is outsourced. The company financed back sort of in January of 2020, did like a $2.5 million raise at 5 cents with a warrant at 7. And as I mentioned, the stock ran a lot earlier on, and then we raised 23 million last February 2021, and to move the trials to completion. So we're 3 quarters in. Not sure yet what we're doing with further financing. We're looking at some of the initiatives around Turkey and costs and so forth, but we have roughly around 8 million in the bank. So, I mean, looking at the trial costs and so forth, there's, we may look at different initiatives and down the road, but nothing's firmly planned. And the burn right now is, apart from the trials, I mean, trials are expensive, right? I mean, running 1,000-person double-blinded study could cost, $30 million plus. Yeah. So, we're making the most of our money, and, we've got, operationally, we don't have an excessive burn. It's mostly on the trial side. That's where it's all going, right? So.
Got it. Can you talk a little bit about, you said you're 75%
Well, we're around seven, like
71%. Yeah,
yeah,
right in
70,
that area.
around there, like 71, 72%.
Can you talk about time frame on when you think you're trying to get to 1,000, right?
Yeah, like we're as I mentioned, like we're looking at doing what we can like this and towards the end of March, Q1, as the slide said. I mean, that's our goal. I mean, we're trying our best, and obviously, it's a goal. We'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, there's an opportunity to look at 800, which and look at taking that to EUA. So that's another option.
Yeah.
But our goal is Q1. I mean, it may, it's hard to say. It may extend, a month or so after. But Turkey is getting up and running, and we'll have to look at the logistics around it. But that's our goal.
Can you cut it down under 1,000 and still get emergency use?
No, I mean, you have to go to the end of the trial, but you could look if the data is strong and the review board thinks it's feasible. You could. It's potentially. I mean, we thought it would happen earlier, but it didn't. So it could happen at 800. Which is should be achievable this quarter. But you may have to go further. You may have to go. Science of this drug is there, and I mean, our team has proved that by getting the phase 3 fast track, clinical work that's been done by California, which I thought was tremendous, and sort of a number of other people. But science is one thing, and then hospitalizations are another, right?
Yep.
This is a huge story. I mean, this is there's not many companies that have a pill left in the COVID trial. I mean, Atia with Fuji's drug, we're running that trial. They're out of it, and you have some Aptly in Canada out of it. I mean, some of the other companies that we talked about before, Citadin, Relief, Humanigen, they're all out of it. So there's we're probably the only game in town with a pill. We're just not, we're not that well known. We're not in mainstream media. It's hard to break in, and it's a Canadian company that's small, sort of an against all odds story. I mean, I took this company from 1 million Canadian to this level. It's quite an achievement for our team. So I appreciate their efforts and respect that. But yeah, of course, if we get EUA, I mean, this company is becomes more of a household word. I mean, it's a huge proposition. It's a binary event that's pretty unmatched by any other, not many public companies, right? So most companies that get an EUA are trading for what, $1 billion, $2 billion, something like that.
I mean, I would imagine your trial is designed to have something like 85% power to capture, say, a 10% effect size on a composite endpoint of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to get into statistical models. It's quite complicated, and statisticians aren't here, but yeah, I mean, it's they're complicated numbers, and
you may need the full 1,000 point.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm obviously very impressed, and with the quality of statisticians and that whole science around that. I mean, it's quite remarkable, right? So that is a key part of obviously hospitalizations, and the way the trial is designed. It's you can read about it in clinical trials, but it's in the beginning we were dosing 2-to-1 bucillamine to placebo at 210, and we started with 1-to-1 and the more optimum dose of 600 milligrams, and the interim points of this trial are moving along, and the safety and so forth. But science is there, a lot of supporting evidence is there, and just a matter of working with the protocol, and made some amendments to it. The FDA is very helpful, and the DSMB and so forth. So we also included other secondary factors to the trial which have an impact too, which is viral load. testing viral load, which wasn't initially there in the beginning. There's been some changes on our protocols and looking at some of the inflammatory markers. So, other things potentially come into consideration as well with the trial. And, but, we did notice that some of the results from the majors, even though their efficacy on Merck wasn't as high as Pfizer, I think it was 30%. I mean, those drugs have different side effects, there's obviously a need for a high safety profile, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant drug that could work with them or alone. So that's, where we come into play. But a lot of the trial was done abroad. And we noticed because the makeup of the patient's comorbidity level, things like that come into account, right? In terms of hospitalization and so forth. And in Europe, people go to the clinics all the time. They go to the hospital. They don't go to clinics as often. So that's where they get treated and they go on the trials right away. So it helps, in terms of patient recruitment and stuff, right? So obviously when the trial got started and, we've been at this for a while, I mean, most phase 3 trials from what I read, I mean, obviously, and know, they do take sometimes a year and a half and stuff. I mean, things have been so fast tracked. We're not Pfizer, we're not Merck. I don't have the budget. We're working, as fast as we can. But the whole progress of the trial is obviously, to get the best quality of patients. Obviously, in the beginning, of the trials earlier on in the early days of COVID, there's a lot of, competition for patients too, right? So a lot of things come into play, right? So, we uncovered some things. So we're very excited and I think, it was a good move moving the remainder of a large part of the remainder of the trial to Turkey. And, we'll just have to wait till that plays out.
Yeah. Have you even, I might be putting you on the spot here, but have you even thought about, the potential, once you get approval, what the potential revenue could be? Have you projected that, or is it too early to think
Well, I mean,
about
I can't, we looked at some numbers and things, but obviously it's, it's quite significant, in terms of how it would shake out. But, that's something that, we have, probably other partners may come in. We're talking to a few groups about different partnering around levels like that. Should that happen, we've had conversations and we've signed some initiatives with groups in India as well to look at international markets and so forth. So something we've thought of and looked at different partners. So
I think it's obviously going to be.
Well, yeah, it'd be big.
A game changer.
Very big, Yeah,
sure.
Definitely a game changer. I mean, obviously, I believe the company would be worth more than 100 million Canadian if that happens.
Yeah.
So,
it's
a good problem to have. So we'll cross that bridge, eventually.
Absolutely, and obviously, if approval happens, are you in a position right now, in terms of where where the drug's going to be manufactured, distributed? You kind of have your ducks in a row on that.
Well, I mean, most of this, we're working with our partner. We have the rights to this drug for this disease and a number of other diseases, specifically following the patents and so forth, the IND of the data. But bucillamine is a generic drug, and it's coming out of, our partner is a group out of, South Korea. So, they'd be the supplier, and they have the rights to this work for COVID in those countries, specifically Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. But they're not running any clinical trials for this. We're the only trial for this drug for COVID, specifically in the world right now, and obviously in North America. I mean, if bucillamine was around like nasylcysteine, like ivermectin, people would be probably talking about it and taking it. The fact is, it's never been available in North America. So this is a drug that's never been available in North America that's in clinical studies. So it's not a household word, and we're not that well known in the US and so forth. So, getting on forums like this helps educate people.
Absolutely. Question, does the Turkish lira's wild fluctuations have any effect on your costs?
Well, we have a general range in terms of what the trials will cost, the remainder of it. Obviously, it'll impact a bit, but the costs are cheaper than they are in the US, so
Yep.
costs are cheaper in the US, are cheaper in Turkey. Right? So.
All right. We have a viewer asking about insider ownership. Can you talk to the insider ownership?
Yeah, I mean, we have about 315 million shares of the company, and like number of different investors, institutions, high net worth, retail. I mean, this has been a big trading stock. Initially I did a first financing of 5 cents, and it's almost 20 back from there. I mean, it's come off, but we still think that has great upside. Myself, Derrick, there's some other people that have a good share position, and I personally own with options, which haven't been exercised. If I take fully into my ownership, about 5% with my options, if they're exercised.
Great. And then do you have, so what is your relationship with the universities that you work with? Is there like a monetary or royalty component to that?
Yeah, different universities, different opportunities. Obviously, on the psilocybin side, they own the patents for delivery with tannin and shitazine, which is a unique way of making formulations, and we have exclusive license to that. So that helped us take that to the next level, and a lot of licensing with the universities because they own a lot of the IP. So there's royalty splits in terms of commercialization, and once the data is studied, and on the methods, TBI stroke studies, we're partnered with them, and we're financing a lot of the studies, and we have access to the data and rev splits as well.
Great. We are getting right to the bottom of the hour. Mark, did you want to say anything before we wrapped it up?
One last question for Derrick, if I could, just out of curiosity. For you alluded to macrodose psilocybin, but by that, do you mean super therapeutic doses, or what's a macrodose in your case?
In my view, a macrodose is going to be anything over 25 to 30 milligrams. Okay. Depending on your size and your body composition, that's really going to determine how much of a psychedelic effect you have with psilocybin. So for me, I'm call it 240 pounds. I'm a big boy. At 60 milligrams, I'm not going to have as much of a psychedelic experience. But if I was to exceed that level, I would see a tremendous psychedelic experience versus at 25 milligrams, it would be more therapeutic.
Okay, got it. Good answer.
Yeah, obviously, Derrick, with like a lot of the psilocybin treatments and that are going on right now, that you have to be monitored, you have to go into a center and be monitored. How would that change, obviously, with Revive, the way Revive is going to do it? It's not obviously going to be the same thing as something that you can take from home, or how would it work?
Well, this is kind of the thing that we've looked at, is that are the current antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications any different than psychedelics? And the answer is no. We both focus on the same receptor site, which is the serotonin 2A receptor or the serotonin 2B receptor, depending on what issue you're incurring. So to say the least, if you were to go off your Xanax, or you were to go off your common anti-anxiety medications and just go off of those, hey, it's Monday, I'm going to quit taking my antidepressants, you're going to experience some very large side effects from not taking that drug. If you go off magic mushrooms tomorrow, body's not going to really shift much. It's not going to care. So when we look at our current antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, more or less psychedelic than what we're offering in the future? No, they're not. We just offer something that's going to be much different in side effect. Now, when it comes to clinical application, this is why we've looked at how can we explore clinical applications outside of Canada and the US, where we have more easier to get along with governments like Antigua, where we're looking at this as an opportunity to address psychedelics for not only the people on the island, but people who come there to vacation. So we're looking at this as a grand opportunity to really bring psychedelics to the masses in such a intricate way that's monitored by doctors, monitored by students, and things of that realm. So it's there's pretty lengthy protocols to go through in the US right now, and that's kind of it's there to protect the people who need to be protected. And I think it's a little bit of an overreach in some cases. I think people have been consuming magic mushrooms and psychedelics for the better part of 60 years, and we've never really seen any significance in society as that resulted. So I think when we look at therapies, there's lots of ways to do this that not only provide a safety net for patients, but provide safety for the practitioners too.
Michael, I just wanted to interject that as a physician with the advent of COVID, to me, what I really saw were a bunch of old problems resurfacing, and I didn't really think the system needed to go into high gear contriving new answers, new solutions to these old problems and new skins. And, to wit, I became involved with another Canadian company trafficking in interferon for COVID-19, working very, very well. But I congratulate you working along the same, leitmotif of, an older drug for this problem. I think it's going to be a smashing success. And I will be following closely and investing personally. Yeah. And I really, really enjoyed your talk.
Yeah. It's, as I mentioned, the science is there, and, we're doing everything we can, but, we'll keep plugging, and appreciate all your guys' support, and we'll keep, doing these sessions, and hopefully bring in some new shareholders and keep talking.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to thank the team from Revive, Michael and Derrick and Mark Swain, for coming on today to get us up to speed on the company. I think it's a really good conversation. Look, Mark has been looking at the company for a long time. We feel that it's very undervalued, not only due to the fact that, this whole, bucillamine for COVID, but also with their psilocybin and CBD programs as well. Very robust pipeline for sure. So we feel that the stock down here at these levels is definitely, worth a look for sure, because just on bucillamine approval alone, it takes the stock to a whole new level, the company to a whole new level. So I know a few people have asked for the slideshow. I will send that to everybody in an attachment to get the feedback, which I'll be sending out shortly. You can get additional information on Revive Therapeutics at the company's comprehensive website at revivethera.com, including details on the company's pipeline as well as the latest press releases. But I want to thank our panel today. I want to thank our attendees for your time. I look forward to your feedback. I'll be sending out a feedback link shortly after the meeting. There is no code word for feedback. Don't worry about it. But I will definitely be sending that out within the next 5 minutes. So until the next time, everybody be safe, be well. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Derrick. Thanks
so much.
Swain.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Derrick. Really good. Great show.
Okay.
Do it again
Thanks a lot.
real soon. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.